Okay, Shalom Akim, Kahalayim La Yahaba Shem Yahushua B'Hashem Ruach double honors to the great Muslim apostles and the elder bishops of Great Millstone. And Yaratazar, you find this video edifying and exhorting. Yaratazar, this one would be a video which really just focuses on a certain part of Latin American history. But I was meditating on a title for the video, and I was thinking of Issachar, man. Issachar was used by Esau Eden. But Yaratazar, after I do the video, then I think of a title. But it pertains to Issachar because just for some context as well. I'm getting into the second chapter now of the Latin American book that I just showed. The Aztecs, which really they were in the land region of Mexico. They called themselves Mexicas, which is where the label Mexico came from. Because the Aztecs called themselves Mexicas. So that's one thing. They resided in the central portion of Mexico. Then you got the Mayans, of whom probably slightly predate, in terms of their civilization, predate the Aztecs, or they had more of a prominent dominance. But after that, the Aztec Empire grew. But anyways, that can be for another video if I want to get too deep into that. But this one, the Mayans and the Aztecs, the point is that they resided in the same region of Mexico. The Mayans, they were south of Mexico, but also in Guatemala and Honduras as well, which is the south. The countries in the Latin American region, south side of Mexico. So that's just a brief, like a warm up, to understand the context of what I'm talking about. Yaratazar will get into the Mayans just a little bit, just to get to the point, and certain of the Aztecs as well, because Esau Eden pretty much had us against each other. But let me try, and I won't just read downright, but Yaratazar, any paragraph that I perceive, okay, this is worth reading out, that's what I'm gonna read out. Let's see. And Yaratazar, in due time, I'll also bring out some precepts too. Alright, so chapter 2 is named Conquering Conquistadors and the Fate of the Aztecs. So let's see, I want to get to the point. I'll read this. So long before the Europeans arrived, the Spaniards, the Portuguese, the French, arrived, these heathens that came up to enslave Jake. It says that long before the Europeans arrived, the Aztec Empire, which was situated in Mexico, and the Inca Empire, which was nestled in the confines of modern-day Peru. So of course you got the Mexicans and you got the Peruvians as well, which of course both are Jake, nevertheless. Now it says, were the wealthiest and most densely populated regions of pre-Latin America. They also had the most formidable militaries. As mentioned earlier in this book, the prerequisite of having a complex and bustling city with plenty of resources is the need for a standing army. And both the Aztecs and the Incas had large armies capable of putting down their foes, their enemies. They could not have risen to the top of pre-Latin America otherwise. So despite Jake being in a lower state, which really, when you depart from your power, that's really when the downfall begins, man. Which again, it began from that Assyrian captivity, referring to 2 Kings 17, if you want to know more about that. But just to focus on the point, from there, Jake really just fell off, man. As soon as, Mosai made us to forget the names of Yahweh Shem Yahushua, Latin tribes as well, it got messed up, so that was part of the curses as well, just to forget our power. So, but despite being in a lowly state, the point I was going to make is that, the Most High still gave us strength as well. And, in fact, speaking of strength, because, again, going into, Issachar, which is the Mexico region, In fact, I'll just read this. This is Genesis 49 verse 14. It says, Issachar is a sturdy donkey. This is the NLT, then I'll read the KJV. In fact, I'll read the KJV first, then I'll read the NLT. So Genesis 49 and 14. Issachar is a strong ass, couching down between two burdens. Of course, ass referring to donkey. So NLT, Issachar is a sturdy donkey, resting between two saddle packs. So, you can imagine a donkey. Of course, the donkeys are made to really work, man. You can use them to work the field, or, if you're traveling, you use a donkey. Of course, in the ancient life. So the point is, donkeys are hard working, despite them not being as, how can I say this, as prominent in stature, like a horse. They still work hard, man. They work hard. It's like, they have that innate strength within them too. Don't underestimate the strength of a donkey in terms of that endurance. So that's the way the Most High compared Issachar, or like a representation of Issachar, as a donkey of whom was taken rest between two saddle packs. You put two, where you contain your things between the left side and the right side of the donkey. You put it on top of the donkey. You put your stuff that you want to store there. And of course, the donkey needs to take a break as well after having this journey. So the same way Issachar as well, that is referring to his work ethic too. And just from what I just read, the scriptures support this information here. I'll read it again so that you can get the message. It says, long before the Europeans arrived, the Aztec Empire, which was situated in Mexico, and the Inca Empire, which was nestled in the confines of modern-day Peru, were the wealthiest and most densely populated regions in pre-Latin America. They also had the most formidable militaries, which formidable just means something that's to be feared and respected. As mentioned, and something that's also very, I was going to say vast or huge, not by literal sense, but in terms of its presence. As mentioned, but it can be literal too. So as mentioned earlier in this book, the prerequisite of having a complex and bustling city, it says complex and bustling city, which means there were strategies put in place, or plans put in place, blueprints put in place in order to ensure that the city thrives, and there's systems within the Aztec Empire. So that shows you right there, Issachar was at work, man. Systems were being put in place. Now, of course, right now, if you look at Mexico has this label of, being into, narcotics, drugs and whatnot, which is, again, the label of Jake to put them down. Of course, it's not all Jakes that's into it, but for the ones that are, the 2/3, they're the wicked Israelites, I should say, because the 2/3 is referring to America, the wicked Israelites over there. But the wicked Israelites over there in Mexico, they're the ones who are doing the drug dealing, and of course, Esau likes to put a scope on that negative side of Jake. You're never trying to put Jake in a positive light. So anyways, that shows their work ethic there, because the systems they had in order to create this city. And it says, with plenty of resources is the need for a standing army. And both the Aztecs and the Incas had large armies capable of putting down their foes. They could not have risen to the top in the pre-Latin America otherwise. Alright, let's see. Alright. Let me read on. So it says, but while the Aztecs and the Incas are quite good at waging warfare, it says, but while the Aztecs and the Incas were quite good at waging warfare against fellow indigenous tribes, they were completely at a loss when it came to dealing with the invading Spaniards, because of course Esau had tools that would be far more advanced, in the eyes of Issachar, the Aztecs. It's Issachar, again, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. A quick list, referring to that is Exodus chapter 1. You see all the tribes that went into Egypt. So that's just a quick reference there. Now it said traditionally the common explanation for why a few hundred Spanish troops were able to topple the Aztec and Inca armies that were in the tens of thousands, has simply been that the Spanish had guns and horses. You see, they had the edge. Now it says these were two things that the Aztecs and Incas did not have in their possession. But while the guns and horses certainly gave the Spanish invaders an edge, their ability to quickly overcome the Aztecs and Incas was much more complicated than that, which means the guns and the horses weren't enough. It says in 1519, a group of Spanish conquistadors left a colonial outpost in the Caribbean and made landfall in Mexico. Prior to their infiltration of the mainland, the Spanish had been cultivating outposts in the Caribbean for several years. The initial encounters between the Latin Europeans and which again, the Latin Europeans is referring to the heathens of whom, the Edomites of which, spoke French, Portuguese, and Spanish, because those are Romance languages which are rooted in, meaning that they're all rooted in the Latin language. That's where they came from. Right, so the initial encounters between the Latin Europeans and the Native Americans of the Caribbean were very similar to the experiences of the Portuguese in Brazil. The natives of the Caribbean were semi-nomadic and put up very little resistance to the Spanish. And semi-nomadic means that, part of they stayed in certain regions for a certain time, but then they moved to another region if need be, which means not that they're completely nomadic. Like nomadic just means that they were completely they were on the move. Semi-nomadic means for a certain season they stay in a certain region, then for another season they may change regions where they stay at. So that's a way to understand nomadic and semi-nomadic. Now, however, when the Spanish landed in Mexico, they would encounter a firmly settled civilization that would have to be seized by force, you see. And that's really what the scriptures foretell in terms of what Jake would have to go through. So it says, however, when the Spanish landed in Mexico, they would encounter a firmly settled civilization that would have to be seized by force, which means the Spaniards, them heathens, wanted to have control over Jake, which is part of the curses. So I'll read this. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and 49. The Lord Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation which tongue thou shalt not understand. And it's true. I believe I'm gonna get to that paragraph, but just to say it before, the Aztecs, they spoke the language of Nahuatl, Nahuatl, but I'm not saying it too good, but I believe that's how it's spelled, Nahuatl, Nahuatl. And of course they needed to translate between Spanish and of course the Nahuatl language that the Aztecs, aka the Mexicans, aka the tribe of Issachar, was speaking back in the day, which was just one of the dialects of which was spoken within that region of Mexico. Because again, there were different tribes, different sub-tribes, within Issachar. The same way there were different tribes of Native Americans. Native Americans just like the umbrella term for all of those tribes there. All right. Let's see. All right. So let me continue here. So it says, however, in fact, let me read that precept one more time. Hold on. So Deuteronomy 28 and verse 49, the Lord Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. So again, the Issachar, because this is what I'm talking about right now, the Mayans, the Aztecs, they weren't they didn't understand the Spaniards. They didn't understand the Portuguese. You know, the Taínos, which are the Brazilians. They didn't understand the Portuguese, man. You know, so they were in their own lingo, and then of course you can see how modern day Brazil, modern day Mexico, because Mexico they have their own dialect of Spanish. But of course, it was influenced by the Spaniards. You got the Taínos, again, aka the modern day Brazilians, of which are again tribe of Asher for the Brazilians, and of course Issachar, which refers to Mexico, or Mexico referring to the tribe of Issachar. But the point is, Brazilians influenced by the Portuguese and the Aztecs, aka the Mexicans, Issachar, influenced by the Spaniards. Hence why they speak the tongue that they speak today. So you can see how Jake was influenced to speak these tongues of which we ought not to have spoken from. That's just us drifting away from the original tongue, which was ancient Hebrew, which we spoke as Israelites. Again, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. And of course, I got a little series on the Native American Indians, which I've done before. Of course, if you go on the channel, you know, you probably see on the playlist there, Native American history. And yeah, we're getting into the Latin American history right now, once more. Anyways, let's continue. So yeah, Spaniards, they wanted to invade, or they wanted to take Mexico by force. So it says, or perhaps the better word to use would be by farce, which is like a disorganized scenario where it's just so disorganized where it just becomes like a comedy. You know, it's worthy of being mocked. It's supposed to be mocked. So, or perhaps the better word to use would be by farce, because the leader of the Spanish conquistadors, Hernan Cortes, another Spaniard, pulled off an incredible facade against the Aztec leader Montezuma. So Cortes's plot to take out Montezuma began shortly after he landed in the Yucatan Peninsula and came into contact with a stranded Spaniard by the name of Geronimo de Aguila. Geronimo de Aguila was a priest who had been shipwrecked on the Yucatan in 1512. He and 17 others survived the wreck and managed to make their way to a Maya settlement, which again, the Mayans were, you could liken them as Issachar as well, because they were in the same or similar region, but they were in the south side of Mexico, and of course they resided also in the regions of Guatemala and Honduras as well, as I mentioned earlier on in this video. All right, let me not get too deep into this history. I may even do another series, Yaratazar, if it be so, to go into certain of the tribes, certain of the sub-tribes, you know, like the Inca Empire, which are the Peruvians, you know, Aztecs, and also, you know, maybe even Taínos or the Mayan Empire as well. But we'll see, Yaratazar, in due time. We'll see, but, you know, I'm trying to get the general sense when it comes to the history of the Latin Americans and also the Native Americans, because, you know, you don't always hear of that history. Typically, you always hear of the history of the transatlantic slave trade, you know, the so-called Negroes and, you know, shipping, you know, within the West Africa side as well, which was really where Israelites were, well, specifically Southern tribe, you know, they had their captivity, you know, within that. Again, it was a slave trade between different land masses, and they mixed the slaves as well. You know, that's why they had the Casta system. And Yaratazar Salak, if I'm talking, but this is actually useful information which explains why, you know, brothers of who may look like a certain tribe are not actually of a certain tribe. You know, like you may be born into Judah, you know, but you're actually a Levite. You know, that's really me referring to myself here. Or, you know, you could be born, or maybe I need to rephrase that again. You could be perceived as Judah, or, you know, by you know, bloodline, you think you look like a Judah, a typical Judah look, but you could be Benjamin, you know, from how your spirit goes. You know, your dad could be Benjamin, but, you know, you don't really know until you actually observe the things through the scriptural lens as well. So the reason why I said that is because in the I may even make another video on that as well later on. We'll see. In the Latin Americans, hold on. In the slave trade, of course, between the Latin tribes and also the South, let me say this, the northern tribes of Israel and the southern tribes of Israel, there was intermingling as well. So let me try to get this image up. Because it's called, I believe it's called the Casta System. Let me see if I can read this summary quickly. So it says here, Google AI, the Casta system was a rigid racial hierarchy implemented by Spanish colonial authorities in the Americas, 16th to 19th centuries, to maintain European dominance. It says it classified individuals based on ancestry, peninsulares, criollos, mestizos, and African/indigenous peoples, dictating social status, legal rights, and taxation. And of course, when it says African or indigenous, it's talking about the southern tribe, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, as well as when it says indigenous, it's talking about the Native American Indians, aka the Seminole Indians, which is Reuben, and the rest of the Native Americans, of which is Gad. So let me see if I can get an image, simple image, just to portray the point. Hold on, let's see. Alright, let's try and zoom in here. It's locking my phone. Phone's got a little crack there, so I'll read it anyways. So, on the top you got Peninsulares, which is the Spaniards, originally born in Spain. You got the Creoles, which it says they're born in New Spain of Spanish parents. It says born in New Spain. I believe that's really talking about the settlements that was set up, in the Latin tribe regions. And then you got the mestizos. It says born of Spanish and indigenous peoples, parents. So let's say it says Spanish and indigenous peoples. Now it's also not just see now I gotta correct my point. It's not just the Native American Indians, but it's also the natives, the native Latin tribes. For example, the Tainos of the Brazilians, the Aztecs of the Mexicans, so on and so forth. So, and of course, what's the other one? Inca as the Peruvians, and so on. There's quite a lot, but that's the point. So that's the mestizos. It says the Spanish and the indigenous people. So it could be either the father could have been Spanish or the father could have been indigenous, man. Dealt with a Spanish woman. So it says here, after that, indigenous people in the purple region, indigenous people, and then you got the enslaved people, which are straight up. What does it say here? It says brought from Africa and the Caribbean. So of course that shows you how the southern tribe intermingled with the northern tribe. So that's why certain brothers, even though they may look like Judah or look like Haitian or what the typical southern tribe look, they may actually generally be a northern tribe, because of this amount of intermingling that was going on. Anyways, I went on a little tangent, but the point was important to make, just to get an understanding that just because you may think you're a certain tribe, like for example, you may be like Ghanaian or Nigerian, or you may come from the western side of Africa, and then you think that Oh, okay, yeah, I gotta be Judah. No, 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 no. You gotta actually observe yourself. Your father, just by, his behavior and what he does, what he likes, you then start to realize, oh, okay, maybe you're not actually Judah. You could be either Levi or you could be Benjamin, depending on how you roll. That's why you got, read the scriptures. There's certain blueprints, to certain to infer or to portray the traits of each tribe. Genesis 49 is a good blueprint for that. That's why I read it for Issachar. Anyways, let's get back to reading. It's all part of the edification to build up your knowledge. To edify means to build up. Now back to the Mayans. So it says, I'm not sure if I want to read this right now. Let's see. No, I'm going to get to the point. So it says the Maya descendants' reactions to the Spaniards are truly curious. Unlike the Aztecs and Incas, who seemed both shocked and intrigued by the newcomers, aka the Europeans, them heathen Edomites, speaking Spanish, speaking Portuguese, the Maya took immediate and decisive action once they encountered the Europeans. So it's that instinctively they knew, yeah, man, Esau Edom is going to come to oppress us. It's that instinctively the Most High put the programming within the Mayans to know that, yeah, man, these lot aren't going to be playing. So, yeah, man, Most High still gave discernment to, certain of the sub-tribes of the tribes. And when I say sub-tribes, again, Inca, hold on. Aztecs and the Mayans, of course, they're like sub-tribes within Issachar, because they both reside, again, Mayans, the south side of Mexico, Aztecs, the central side, the central portion of Mexico, other parts as well for the Mayans, Guatemala and Honduras, that region as well, which is also the south side of Mexico. So that's what I mean by sub-tribes. Right, so yeah, it said the Maya took immediate and decisive action once they encountered the Europeans. It seems that they intuitively realized that these explorers were a potential threat. And yeah, the curses were written, man. This was for prophecy's sake. This was what prophecy say. And instead of attempting to make nice with them, as the Aztecs and Incas would do, the Maya seized the shipwrecked men, making sure that none of them escaped. They killed all but 2 of them. So the Mayans, certain of Issachar, they actually went hardcore. They were like, no, this ain't it. Even from that alone as well, it could have been Reuben. It could have been Reuben, it could have been Gad. Them type of spirits amongst Issachar. Most I knows how the tribes were intermingled, man, even before Esau Edom came. Because remember, they still went through that Assyrian captivity and scattered, of course, in the Latin American region. But again, as the scriptures say, we know in part and we prophesy in part. So there's only so much that we can acquire based on the knowledge Yahweh Shema Shai has there's only so much that we can relay based on the knowledge Yahweh Shema Shai has given us. We'll have more understanding, or really we'll have full understanding in the kingdom of Yahweh Shai. But with what we got, we use what we can and get the outcome as intended, which is really to teach the history of the Latin American tribes. Alright, where was I? I'll just read it again. I'll read it again. So it says, it seems that they intuitively realized, so the Mayans realized, that these explorers were a potential threat. And instead of attempting to make nice with them, as the Aztecs and Incas would do, the Maya seized the shipwrecked men, making sure that none of them escaped. They killed all but 2 of them. Then it says the men who were slain did not have an easy death. So really, even Esau, these heathens, when they were oppressing Jake or trying to oppress certain Jakes, Jake gave them a hard time. So it wasn't like the Most High just said, "Alright, it's a wrap." Most High still allowed us to have some resistance against Esau too. So it wasn't easy, just such as Reuben as well. The 3 Seminole Wars as well that they fought. It wasn't easy for Esau to capture us. That's the point. Now, at any rate, Geronimo, says the men who were slain did not have an easy death, as they were killed in ritual human sacrifice. So again, Jake went, Jake went, Jake went far off in their reasoning, worshipping idols, and that their minds were corrupted, man. You know, as Isaiah 1 refers to, you know, a sick. So I'm gonna just read that one out specifically. The whole head is sick, and this proves it as well. You know, this proves that the head, Most High really punished us for real, for real. Now I'll get to the point. So Isaiah 1 and verse 3, it says, "The ox knoweth his owner, and the ass," which is again the donkey, "his master's crib. But Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider." It says, "A sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backwards." There's a reason why the Most High had Jake in this position. Now let me continue. So at any rate, Geronimo, so again, they were used for, Jake used the Spaniards for human ritual sacrifice, just to make it clear. As it says there on, let's see if I can select here about that. Where is it? Is it human ritual sacrifice? But yeah, it's on, page 22. Sometimes reading backwards ain't really easy, man. Oh yeah, so it's over there. Yeah, ritual human sacrifice, man. Should be around there. Yeah, because on my screen it's kind of in reverse. Yaratazar, when you're watching it, you'll be able to see it properly. So yeah, at any rate, Geronimo, which is not that classic story of Geronimo. That other Geronimo was a Native American Indian. Very courageous. I believe it could have been a Reubenite or Gadite. Probably a Gadite. Yeah. But either way, he was either Gad or Reuben. Again, Native American Indian or Seminole Indian. But this is a different Geronimo. This was a Spaniard Geronimo. So it says, at any rate, Geronimo and his fellow shipmate, whose name comes down as to us as Guerrero, managed to survive the ordeal. They were enslaved by their captors and forced to do menial tasks. So that Jay was getting a taste of the kingdom there, man. Jay was getting a taste of, because of course, as the scriptures has prophesied, the heathens will be our possession. It says that in Leviticus 25 and verse 44. If it's not 25 and 44, it's 26 and 44. But I believe it's, I'll just check it quickly before. It's Leviticus 25 and 44. Yep, Leviticus 25 and 44. If you want to read that. But it shows that the heathens will be our possession. When the priest of Geronimo de Aguilar saw Cortes and his crew anchor on the Yucatan, he ran to his countrymen and managed to escape. Yeah, he was running for dear life. Geronimo had managed to learn the Mayan tongue during his enslavement, and Cortes realized how useful of a tool this was, as he could more easily establish communication with the locals. Shortly thereafter, Spaniards made their way to the Tabasco coast, where they got into a skirmish and with some locals after the Spaniards let loose with their cannons. Their adversaries decided to sue for peace. As part of their peaceful gestures, they brought forth several gifts for Cortes and his crew. Among these gifts were 20 indigenous women of other tribes who had been enslaved by the Maya. One of these women was a bright and inquisitive teenage girl whom Cortes would later dub Donna Marina. Marina was actually Aztec in origin, so she was fluent in both Mayan and Aztec. which the language of the Aztec, it says in brackets, Nahuatl languages, man. Page 23. See if I can point to it. Yeah, right there. You see Nahuatl, you see in the brackets, Nahuatl language. So Nahuatl. But yeah, Yaratazar, I want to keep these videos concise because sometimes there can be a lot to digest, man. Yeah, man, let me mark it. Yaratazar, I'll then do another part, probably based on Dona Marina, because she was also used by the Spaniards in order to help conquer, I believe, the Aztecs, really. So Yaratazar, going to keep it simple, to the point. Shalom, wa Yabashim Yashab Brakatha, and double honors to the Great Muslim Apostles and the elder bishops of Great Millstone. Shalom.